In many other space games, the player is confined to menus, but in Star Citizen, we have a whole ship, inside and out. I think many of us are excited to one day get out of the pilot seat and into the ship. These refueling systems feel like the start of that, and it's very exciting. This is why it's somewhat unfortunate that the important systems are menus. And even though this is the first implementation, I still can't help but long for the tactile experience that refueling could offer. In the refueling process, the first thing you do is fill up your pods in the Vehicle Maintenance Services menu. This is fine for now and functions pretty intuitively, so I do like it, but it's not tactile. Moving the option to fill the pods to an MFD would, in my mind, make this a more tactile experience, though I do understand that MFDs can be a bit buggy to interact with for now. But honestly, filling up the pods really isn't where the menu feeling becomes noticeable. I actually don't have too much of a problem with how it's handled now. It feels fine. When we get up out of the pilot seat to step back to the refueling console is when the function starts to feel wrong. The console itself is actually very well set up, and that's part of the problem. When I'm there at the console looking to refuel a client, I look around me and see a box without a view. This is noticeable because as I'm doing the refueling process in my mind, I'm thinking, what's happening outside? Where is the ship? How close are they to docking? I'm looking for visual feedback that just makes sense for the process. I want to see the ship docking. I want to know how the process is going. But I look around in the bridge and I see a small slit off to my side. And this isn't a condemnation of the MISC's view. I actually love the MISC's view. It's a lack of tactile feedback that feels like it should be there but isn't. Eventually, I will get an indication on the console that the client has docked, but that's not very tactile. However, if I go back to the catwalk, all of this changes. Not only have I traversed some of the ship, making it feel more used, but I've also entered a more open space that gives me the feedback that I'm looking for. Being able to look out over the catwalk at the ship that's docking changes the experience from elements on a menu lighting up to an actual ship pulling in and attaching in real time to my ship, and that feels amazing. But the problem is the console is in a box in the front, right next to the pilot seat that I've been confined to for so long, and it has all of the functionality that's needed for refueling, including the functionality of the consoles on the catwalk, making them a gimmick at the moment. An often repeated quote that a game dev once said is, "When given the opportunity, gamers will optimize the fun out of a game." That is very true. Gamers will min-max anything and everything. So if the best way to do something is to sit inside a small box and push buttons on a menu, whether it's the most fun way or not, that's what they're going to do. Now, like I said, the refueling console is really well designed. My only complaint, and it's a small one, is that the pod management screen doesn't seem necessary. Best I can tell, the additional functionality provided by the pod management screen is the orientation of the pods to the ship, the pump, stop, open buttons, and the status of the nozzle. The pod's orientation to the ship is nice, but it's not necessary, and if it was eliminated, the pump, stop, open buttons could be moved to the main screen, which would make it much more intuitive to use because everything would be right there just as soon as you pull it up. At that point, the only functionality that would be left would be the status of the nozzle, and I'll make a suggestion about that in a moment. But what if we actually use the catwalk for the tactile experience? What if the console was moved to the back of the catwalk so that it's looking over the refueling arm as you process the request? What if some of the functionality was removed from the console and given to the actual fueling hardware? For example, what if the flow rate, instead of being a slider on a menu, was a lever or a wheel on the individual pods that you could hover over and scroll your mouse wheel to adjust, getting players to move around on the catwalk as they refuel their client? Or maybe it's just a simple slider like it is now, but it's on the pod console and not the main console. Yes, it's likely that everything would be digital in the future, but turrets would also be automated. They would not be manned by humans. Yet they are manned by players in-game because it gives players more to take control of in different locations on the ship. And that's what I'm suggesting here. The pricing, ship and pilot information, along with the progress tracker, all make sense for the main console. But the refueling arm operation could be moved to another console or perhaps its own window. This would provide more space for a more detailed view of what's happening with the refueling arm itself and its status. And the ability to pump, stop, open the fuel pods could be removed entirely from the main console and left on the pod console instead. Maybe these are bad suggestions. I'm just spitballing here and you'll have to decide. But my main point that I would like to get across is refueling on the catwalk is far better and a more tactile experience than sitting on a console in a confined space, toggling elements on a menu right next to the seat I've been confined to for years. Moving back to the catwalk and interacting with the various functional objects to execute the refueling process is the kind of gameplay that Star Citizen can offer that none of these other menu games can.